Simba Jr. From a weak cub to the king of the savannah, an epic struggle. When we speak of wild animals that strike fear into human hearts, the lion immediately comes to mind, the king of the jungle, the most feared creature of all. But did you know that the life of this powerful animal, a symbol of strength and majesty, is in fact filled with hardship before he claws his way to his fearsome reputation? His life is truly an endless series of challenges and battles, a daily test of survival. From the very moment of birth, his journey begins in a merciless world, where each day is a new fight. For lions, childhood is far from innocent. It's a stage filled with danger. A young cub could be killed by cunning hyenas, trampled by herbivore herds without even realizing it, or perish from the unforgiving hunger. But the greatest threat might come from within his own family. If the mother sees him as weak, she may abandon or even kill him. And if a new dominant male invades his father's pride, that new leader won't hesitate to kill all the cubs that carry his predecessor's genes. Even if he survives this stage, adolescence is no less brutal. As a teenage cub, he will find himself without a pride, without territory, and without respect. He'll be chased away by older lions who see him as a potential threat, expelling him as if he were nothing more than an annoying intruder. But the trials don't end there. Lionesses, who might seem like allies, can be even more ruthless than the males. If he fails to prove that he's strong enough, they will ignore or even attack him as a group, as if to say, "Learn quickly how to be a real lion." And after years of running and endless suffering, the moment of truth arrives, a confrontation with the dominant lion he once fled from in a moment of weakness. This fight is everything. It will be fierce and brutal, and the young lion will put everything he has on the line. He might lose the first battle, and maybe the second too, but these defeats will teach him the harsh lessons he needs to one day become king. Finally, after years of struggle, the moment of glory comes. The decisive battle ends in a glorious victory, and he becomes the new king of the savannah. But things aren't always so simple. The lionesses have their own rules, and as a new king, he's not exactly on their VIP list. His mission now is to dominate them and prove he deserves to be their leader. If he's strong and majestic, with a roar that shakes the ground, the lionesses might accept him as their new king. But if he fails to show his strength, he may be chased off once more, and this time, it could be fatal. At times, the pressure may drive him to commit terrible acts, such as cannibalism or even attacking the lionesses. But as a true king, he must show everyone that he can rule with an iron paw. If he fails, he'll find himself hunted by the lionesses, forced to flee with his tail between his legs, trying to save his life. And this is where our little lion story begins. Simba Jr. Not the famous Disney Simba, but a real lion raised in the Botswana savannah. From a young age, Simba Jr. knew that a lion's life was nothing but a series of harsh trials. He grew up in a world like a savage reality show, where his strength and willpower were tested every single day. His story is one of survival and of earning his rightful place as king. A story that takes us deep into the heart of the lion's world, where only the strong survive and glory belongs to those who dare to challenge fate. In 2018, Simba Jr. was born into a pride deep in the heart of the savannah, where life was a battle for survival from day one. Of all the male cubs born alongside him, only two survived, Simba Jr. and his brother. But luck wasn't on his brother's side. He lost his life early on after leaving the pride in search of his own territory and getting into a bloody fight with other lions. Simba Jr., however, chose a different path, one filled with challenges, but he was determined to succeed. From his earliest days, Simba Jr. was closely watched. He spent his cubhood hiding from hungry hyenas, enduring hunger, and running from older lions who saw him as a threat. But Simba never gave up. He chose to fight and show his strength rather than be labeled the weak one. In the lion world, weakness means death. A pride of lions is a complex system. where every member has a role. At the top stands the dominant male, the king, who protects the territory and ensures his genes are passed on. Next are the lionesses, who do the hunting and care for the cubs. The cubs themselves must simply survive in a world full of internal and external threats. But for a male lion to become dominant, he must challenge and kill the current leader in a fierce, often bloody battle. These fights reveal the true power of these magnificent creatures. When a new lion takes over, everything changes drastically. The first thing the new male does is kill the cubs of the previous leader, ensuring his own genes dominate instead. It's a cruel law, but the law of the unforgiving Savannah. And here is where Simba Jr. made his first big mistake. In trying to assert his dominance, he began eliminating the previous leader's cubs. But he didn't anticipate the reaction of the lionesses, who turned out to be far more aggressive than expected. Usually, this behavior leads to the lionesses submitting out of fear to the new male. But in Simba Jr.'s pride, things were different. These lionesses were some of the fiercest hunters in the region, and they had no intention of giving in easily. Instead, the angry lionesses united against Simba Jr. in a swift and brutal rebellion. They attacked him with force and coordination he hadn't expected, especially since he was still recovering from his battle with the previous alpha. Simba Jr. ended up being expelled from the pride before he could even claim his place or mate with any of the lionesses. But Simba Jr. wasn't the type to give up easily. Despite being cast out, he was determined to reclaim the pride. He realized that to survive and thrive in the savannah, he would need to show not only strength, but intelligence and patience as well. He retreated far enough to recover from his wounds, but stayed close enough to keep a watchful eye on the pride. He began planning his return, knowing this time his tactics had to be different. He needed to show the lionesses that he was not only strong, but wise enough to lead. And so, Simba Jr. began a new journey, determined to earn his rightful place in the pride. Simba Jr.'s story wasn't over. He was determined to be accepted and was willing to do anything to prove he deserved to be king. That is the power of determination, and perhaps a bit of stubbornness. So, after his exile, the pride remained without a dominant male, but the savannah has its own way of restoring order. By 2024, with no male leader, the lionesses became the true rulers of the pride, taking charge of hunting and protecting the cubs. In this matriarchal system, the wisdom and strength of the females ensured the group's survival. But Simba Jr., still unwilling to give up on his dream of leadership, kept watching closely, waiting for the perfect moment to return. Simba Jr. tried approaching the pride several times, but the lionesses were always on high alert. During one attempt, the females met him with ferocity, resulting in an uneven clash. Things didn't go as Simba had hoped. He walked away with a few new scars, yet his determination never wavered. In the midst of this, a new threat emerged. Two young nomadic lions, strong and experienced in the savannah's brutal politics, arrived searching for a pride to conquer. Seeing the pride without a dominant male, they saw a golden opportunity. They advanced with confidence, knowing this might be their chance to assert dominance. But Simba Jr., always vigilant, spotted the intruders and immediately realized his dream was in danger. If the lionesses accepted the newcomers, he'd lose any chance of leading the pride. Determined to protect his future, Simba Jr. devised a clever plan. He waited for the right moment, and when one of the nomads was isolated, he launched a precise ambush using the cunning he had developed over the years. With a mix of brute strength and intelligence, Simba Jr. took down the lone nomad, using surprise to neutralize the threat. But the danger wasn't over. The second nomadic lion, realizing his companion's absence, moved in to claim dominance. When the lionesses tried to fight him off, he unleashed deadly force in a vicious battle, killing one lioness and spreading fear among the others. With the lionesses too weak to resist, he began eliminating the cubs and young lions to ensure only his bloodline would continue. Simba Jr. couldn't stand by and watch his chance at leadership be destroyed. With a roar that echoed through the savannah, he stepped forward to confront the nomad. This was his last chance. He knew he had to win, not only to secure his role as leader, but to protect the pride he had sworn to lead. The clash between Simba Jr. and the invading lion began. It was a savage battle that would decide the pride's fate. The lionesses, once afraid of Simba, now watched carefully, knowing the outcome would affect them all. Simba Jr., aware this was his final shot, summoned every ounce of strength and cunning he had. With a decisive strike, Simba Jr. brought the nomad down, seizing his rival's neck with agility and power. Then he stood exhausted over the fallen lion, roaring as his victory echoed through the savannah. He had finally earned his place, but at a steep cost. Bloodied and battered, the lionesses who once attacked him now looked on with respect. They had witnessed his courage and determination to protect the pride from a true threat. In the days following the epic battle, Simba Jr. remained injured, weak but determined to recover. And then something surprising happened. The lionesses, once hostile, began hunting and bringing food to him, as if thanking him for his bravery and sacrifice. It was a rare moment in the lion world, a gesture of gratitude from females to a male who had fought for them. Over time, Simba Jr. regained his strength. The same lionesses who once rejected him now accepted him as their new king. In an extraordinary decision, they chose not to kill the few remaining cubs of the former leader. Instead, they waited until the cubs grew and the lionesses were ready to mate again. Usually, when lionesses are cubless, they enter estrus quickly, but since some cubs had survived, it took a few more weeks before Simba Jr. was officially accepted as the dominant male. Finally, after all the trials and suffering, Simba Jr. was crowned king of the pride. He had earned his rightful place, becoming a respected leader the lionesses trusted. Under his rule, the pride flourished and reached a rare harmony where each member had a role and purpose. Simba Jr., once a weak cub fleeing from hyenas and older lions, had become a fair and powerful ruler. His journey was filled with hardships that forged him into the leader he became. He proved that life in the savannah, though brutal, can be full of surprises and moments of glory. Simba Jr. shows us that no matter how great the challenges, perseverance and resilience can lead to greatness. But as we said in the beginning, becoming king is never easy. The challenges never end. And so Simba Jr. continues to protect his territory and pride from other lions in a daily battle for survival. Now 6 years old and enjoying a period of relative peace, the question remains, how long will this peace last? Because in the savannah, nothing is guaranteed. Every day is a new battle.
In the heart of the savannah, where life is measured by roars and death by silence, a lion was born. He wasn't the strongest nor the fiercest, but he was the smartest, the most steadfast and ambitious. He faced kings, saw empires collapse, and walked over their ashes like an invincible shadow. Perhaps he didn't seek the throne nor chase glory, but he engraved his name in the memory of the wild in a way no one ever had before. He wasn't just a lion. He was a legend, walking on 4 legs, a ghost that survived the jaws of death and emerged with pride from the heart of battles without bowing to his opponents. This is the story of Pretty Boy, the lion who chose to live free when others chose to die for glory. In this thrilling documentary, we won't just watch, we will feel, we will tremble, and we will respect the greatness of silence and the strength of the one who remains after the roar fades. Get ready. You are about to enter the world of the Mapogo lions, some of the most brutal and blood-soaked lions in the pages of history. Before the emergence of the famous Mapogo Coalition, Pretty Boy lived an ordinary life in the wildlands that would later become part of their empire. He wasn't known by that name yet. He was a young lion, still relying on his pride, learning the laws of survival in the wild. The scent of the wind, the danger of crocodile-filled rivers, and the meanings behind roars coming from afar. He watched the older males from a distance, sensing the hierarchy of power, witnessing the cruelty that came with it. He learned early that the world was not ruled by justice but by dominance. His mother cared for him, and his siblings played with him. But the safety of childhood was temporary. All around him, the wild was merciless. Hyenas lurked, and rival males invaded. One day, the dominant male who protected them disappeared. Perhaps he was expelled or killed. From that moment, everything changed. A shadow began to loom over his pride. Over time, the bonds between him and his pride began to weaken. He felt the change in the way adult lions looked at him. They no longer saw a cub, but a rising threat. As with all young males, he was expelled from the pride by the law of nature. He began wandering alone, avoiding stronger males, surviving on leftover kills, searching for a purpose. During his journey, he met others like him, exiles, cubs cast aside by life who chose solitude. Among them were those who would later be known as Mr. T, Kinky Tail, Rasta, Scar, and Makulu. At first, they formed fragile bonds, not out of friendship, but survival. They needed each other. They had nothing. And yet, the future was open before them. With every challenge they faced together, their bond grew stronger. As for Pretty Boy, the silent observer, he began to understand the power of unity. Their lives had changed from being lonely and empty, with no food, no land, no females, into a strong, united group. Their presence together changed everything. When they moved as one, other lions took notice, hyenas fled, and herds scattered swiftly. Indeed, the group began to move with clear goals. They entered lands ruled by dominant males, testing boundaries. Pretty Boy felt the thrill of danger, but also something else. He realized they were not just wandering lions, they could become rulers. It started with nighttime scouting missions, stealing kills and leaving signs in lands not their own. Over time, some of them grew more aggressive, especially Mr. T and Kinky Tail. Their intentions focused on attacking an old coalition in the east. They heard the roars of a pride ruled by aging males and cubs, an ideal opportunity. Pretty Boy wasn't loud or expressive, but he fully understood what the rest of the group wanted. This was their moment. If they succeeded, they wouldn't just survive, they would rule. So he looked at his 5 companions, each carrying their own scars, hunger, and determination. There was no going back. The wild had cast them out, but they would return this time as invaders. Despite the rising momentum among the young lions, Pretty Boy may have hesitated. The recklessness of Mr. T and Kinky Tail troubled him. Their aggression and obsession with dominance clearly revealed their brutal nature. He had seen what happens to those who rise too quickly. The wild knows well how to slowly humiliate them. Perhaps he silently questioned whether this coalition was truly a path to survival, or a suicide led by reckless ambition. He didn't seek bloodshed for blood's sake. He knew what war between lions meant. Cubs slaughtered, mothers torn apart, males fighting to the death. He had seen it as a cub. He had smelled the scent of rotting wounds and corpses left behind by fallen kings. Later, when the moment came, when they neared enemy territory, Pretty Boy remained calm, while the others roared with excitement. Some surely noticed his silence, especially Scar, who didn't think he was ready. But Pretty Boy avoided him. Deep down, he didn't want war, but he had no choice. He knew he couldn't face the wild alone again. As for Makulu, the oldest among them, he wasn't the loudest or most violent either. His strength was in his long experience and sharp focus, reflected in the way others moved when he stepped forward. Pretty Boy watched him closely to learn. Makulu had survived horrors no one else had seen. He carried the calm of a lion who had faced death and returned stronger. One evening, before the first real confrontation, Pretty Boy found himself walking beside him. There was no fiery roar, only silence. Their steps in the dark were accompanied by the distant sounds of herds, while Makulu pressed forward with deep determination and one phrase echoing in his mind: "Either we do it together, or we don't do it at all." Those words were enough. He didn't promise them victory, nor glorify the fight. He only thought of their unity, the only weapon they had against the cruelty of the wild. Alone, each one of them was doomed. But united, as 6 strong lions, they could become something else. Something never seen in lion coalitions before. In that moment, Pretty Boy realized that the presence of Makulu gave him stability and resolve. He didn't need to roar the loudest or lead the charge. He only had to stand with his brothers when the moment came. And that moment was coming fast. And so, the 6 males entered enemy lands under the cover of darkness. The scent of the dominant males was still present, but faint, a sign of their weakening hold. The pride they targeted quickly surrendered, previously protected by kings whose strength had faded and influence had withered. At that time, their coalition had no name yet. They weren't the Mapogo. They were just 6 young males, driven by hunger and led by the goal of survival. Their first fight came quickly, roars tearing through the night as the aging males charged at dawn, trying to defend their legacy, but they were no match. One was killed instantly, the other fled. The weak cubs were crushed between the jaws of these 6 killers. The Lionesses initially joined the aging males and fought fiercely, but soon surrendered. The coalition claimed the pride with ease and force. Pretty Boy fought alongside his brothers with a silent but ruthless style. He didn't indulge in chaos like Mr. T, who ripped through enemies with savage intensity. Instead, he was precise, strategic, striking where needed, retreating when necessary. When it was all over, he didn't celebrate. He stood at the edge of the plains, gazing over the land that now belonged to them. One by one, they snatched prides from their enemies. Their reputation spread like wildfire. Lions across the region whispered about the black-maned ghosts who left no cub alive, no king breathing. Pretty Boy was there in every battle, every roar, every moment the balance of power shifted. He was no longer a wanderer, no longer hesitant. He had become a conqueror, a member of the most feared coalition in modern wild history. Yet, in quiet moments, he still carried the burden of this path, what it had cost and what it would cost. The future wasn't lit with glory. He preferred survival and caution over arrogance. As the land expanded, so did the challenges. Dominance was not peace, but the beginning of a new war, a war of patience and endurance. The Mapogo coalition controlled vast territories, commanding several prides, pushing their borders further than any group had dared before. But each day was a new test. Pretty Boy quickly learned that strength alone wasn't enough to keep the throne. Tension began to rise within the coalition. Mr. T and Kinky Tail were always pushing for more. Insatiable, relentless, more brutal and unpredictable. Rasta and Scar became more isolated. Makalu tried to keep order, but barely succeeded. In the heart of this storm, Pretty Boy stood firm. He was respected because he never let bloodlust consume him. The Lionesses trusted him more than the others. He was often seen lying close to cubs, alert but non-aggressive. He was the opposite of the chaos the others brought. Meanwhile, enemies were everywhere. Nomadic males trying to sneak into Mapogo lands, former kings plotting revenge, young coalitions forming in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. But Mapogo's response was always brutal. They tore their enemies apart with terrifying speed. Pretty Boy was always present. He might not have started the fight, but he never missed one. His presence balanced the scales. If Mr. T was fire and death, Pretty Boy was control and command. One day, one of their toughest challenges came from 3 strong young males circling the borders of their land. They were bold, organized, a clear sign that the new generation was watching and learning. Still, the Mapogo chased them relentlessly. But the message was clear. Time was shifting, and the balance would soon tip. Inside the coalition, cracks had already begun to spread, especially when Mr. T and Kinky Tail broke off, forming their own unit and leaving the others behind. That left Pretty Boy with Makulu, Rasta, and Scar. It wasn't just a split, it was the start of a collapse, a fracture in a fortress built on resolve and blood. Yet Pretty Boy survived every hardship, from enemy attacks to internal conflict. But the real challenge had yet to come. The challenge wasn't conquest. It was holding on to what was slowly falling apart. Time passed. The group that once seemed unbreakable had now fractured. Mr. T and Kinky Tail were operating separately, while the other 4, Pretty Boy, Makulu, Rasta, and Scar, defended what was left of their territory. The unity that made them an unstoppable force had started to crumble. The world around them was changing. The weight of past battles began to wear down their spirits. Pretty Boy stayed close to Makulu. They were more balanced and less reckless than the others. Rasta grew quieter. Scar limped from an old injury that never healed. The power they had built with yesterday's brutality now felt more like a fading memory than a living force. Their movements became fewer. They were no longer seeking expansion, but protection of what little remained. Yet new threats were already creeping toward them. Young coalitions began testing their strength. Roars of unfamiliar males echoed from beyond the borders, louder and more challenging than before. The wild no longer feared the Mapogo as it once did. Though they were still seen as legends of strength, the cracks in their ranks were undeniable. Pretty Boy felt it, as if the land itself whispered the calm before the storm. It was no longer about blood, it was about legacy. And as he patrolled the edges of his kingdom, he realized that the shadows closing in were not from outside, but from time itself. They had ruled for a long time. Now their turn had come to face the brutality of stronger, tougher enemies. In a battle that would decide their fate, maybe not now, but soon. The downfall began when Kinky Tail, who had separated from the others, was ambushed by a rival coalition. Though he fought fiercely, he was alone, and they were many. His body was found torn, lifeless. Mr. T responded with fiery rage. He returned alone to avenge his brother, and succeeded in killing one of the attackers, regaining some of his pride. But it wasn't long before he too was surrounded by enemies. He fought to his last breath, roaring until his voice fell silent forever. The Mapogo were now 4. News of 2 deaths spread quickly. Many lions were emboldened to attack the remaining members, especially after the death of the coalition's most savage member, Mr. T. Soon. A new coalition emerged, called the Majinjalane. 4 strong young males who followed in the Mapogo's footsteps, but with youthful hunger and modern warfare tactics. Pretty Boy felt the glory starting to turn against them. Their dominance was beginning to shrink. Then Rasta suddenly disappeared, likely killed in a skirmish. Soon after, Scar vanished as well. Whether he died or chose exile, no one knew. Only 2 remained, Pretty Boy and Makulu. They roamed together through the remnants of their former kingdom. They were no longer kings, but ghosts, moving silently, avoiding conflict, living on instinct and memory. Pretty Boy no longer sought battle. He sought refuge, peace, a place of safety. But the fierce Majinjalane lions had begun to close in. They were strong, young, and more united than the Mapogo had ever been. Gradually, they took over the prides the Mapogo once ruled. The Lionesses shifted their loyalty. Even the land itself seemed to forget who once walked it. Still, Pretty Boy didn't flee far from his former kingdom. He moved silently, choosing solitude over war. After facing death countless times, he now chose life. Their downfall wasn't caused by a single battle, but by a slow collapse of everything they had once built. Pretty Boy didn't survive through strength, but through isolation and extreme caution. He outlived all his brothers. He lived to see the rise and fall of the empire they once built, a force that had terrified everyone. He escaped death more than once, and now he roamed the wild as the shadow of a legend. No pride, no land, no kingdom, but he had preserved his life. In a world where strength is often measured by an early death, survival became the real reward. New lands fell under the rule of the Majingalane lions. Their roars filled the night. Their scent marked what was once Mapogo territory. But Pretty Boy had learned something none of them yet knew: how to survive, how to live after glory. He hunted when he could, avoided conflict when needed, and stayed on the move. Some lionesses from his old pride still remembered him, even let him approach. The cubs looked at him with curiosity, unaware of who he once was. He didn't need to reclaim a throne. The throne was already gone. What he carried now was something different: knowledge, wisdom, and awareness. The savannah quieted around him. Seasons changed. Rain fell and evaporated. Grass withered and bloomed again. Prey herds migrated across the plains, and Pretty Boy followed from afar. He no longer chased power, he simply existed, with caution and survival instinct. From time to time, he faced younger males. Some challenged him, most ignored him. He fought only when he had to, and rarely with the fierceness of his youth. The years had changed him. His body was leaner, scarred, but in his eyes still sparkled that flame from his younger days. Sometimes he returned to the places he once ruled: the water holes where battles had been fought, the trees where cubs once played, the borders he had marked with his roars. No one recognized him anymore. To them, he was just another lone male, lost. But in the wind, in the rustle of the grass, echoes remained. Faint, perhaps, but real. He had walked through fire, built an empire, lost everything, and still he lived. There were no celebrations waiting for him, no grand return, only a slow journey into the silence he had chosen. In his final days, Pretty Boy walked the edges of forgotten lands. His body slowed, his roar softened, but his eyes still held that same passion for life. Maybe he was no longer the lion he once was, but he was not broken. He entered a new phase of existence, one no longer ruled by dominance, but by wisdom and awareness. He could sense danger before seeing it, move without being seen, preserve energy, let go of things lions usually fight to the death for. He had no pride to defend, no cubs to protect, no land to claim. He had nothing left to prove. Pretty Boy lived for a short time beside a quiet waterhole, visited only by antelope and a few old lionesses. There he found moments of rest, moments of peace. He lay beneath the same stars that once lit his path as a king. In a world that never stops fighting, Pretty Boy became an unforgettable ghost. Despite his long wandering, narrow escapes, withdrawal from war, and solitary walks without fear, his day came. He passed beneath the shade of a tree. No audience, no final roar. He left with the wind, with the dust, leaving behind endless memories. He may not have left a kingdom, or cubs, or a pride bearing his name, But the wild carried his legacy in its plains and hills, as a lion who survived what others couldn't. His story traveled through the savannah, through lionesses who lay beside him, and through the memories of the Mapogo era. Young lions who came after him never saw him, but they lived in a world he and his coalition helped shape. A world still marked by the fearsome imprint of the Mapogo coalition and the thrilling, intense details of their lives as one of the greatest lion coalitions ever known. In the end, Pretty Boy wasn't the loudest, nor the most savage or destructive, but he was the one who remained. And in the wild, it is the one who remains who tells the greatest stories.
Dear viewers, welcome. The time, March 1898. The place, Kenya, east of the famous Mount Kilimanjaro in the harsh Tsavo Desert. This is where it all began. Terrifying stories were passed down, and tragic news spread of men who met their end in the jaws of two of the fiercest lions of the time, who alone were responsible for the deaths of up to 135 people, leaving behind images of the victims and the immense tragedy that befell them. Throughout history, Tsavo lions were known as some of the fiercest man-eating types. Despite being smaller than their Serengeti counterparts who lived up the mountain, likely due to their harsh, resource-scarce environment. It was also said that these lions were usually found in small prides, often with only one male for mating, who held exclusive breeding rights. In contrast, most other prides included many lionesses and at least two males. As the slave trade routes developed through Tsavo, Kenya, many traders forcefully marched their captives across the barren lands. Due to the extreme heat, one of the slaves often died along the way, left behind as easy prey for predators. Many believe this gave the Tsavo lions an early taste for human flesh. The tragedy began when a team of Indian workers led by British Lieutenant Colonel John Henry Patterson arrived in Kenya to build a bridge over the Tsavo River as part of the Kenya-Uganda Railway project. It seemed doomed from the start. As Bruce Patterson wrote in his book, The Lions of Tsavo, few men at the end of the railway knew that the name itself was a warning. Tsavo meant place of slaughter in the local language, referring to the killings committed by the Maasai people, who often attacked weaker tribes and slaughtered their men, long seen as an omen of doom by other communities. Shortly after John Henry Patterson and his team began construction, a worker went missing. After searching, his mutilated body was found. Fearing that a lion was responsible, Patterson, realizing the looming danger, set out the next day to stop the horror and track the beast. Instead, he found more bodies, men from earlier missions whose stories had been buried with them. The next day, another of Patterson's men vanished. By April, the number of missing had risen to 17. And that was just the beginning. The killings continued for months, with the clever, elusive lions outwitting every fence, barrier, and trap set up to stop them, causing hundreds of workers to flee and halting bridge construction. The lion attacks devastated the camp. No one could stop the massacres, especially since they often happened at night, when the hungry beasts stalked the workers relentlessly. Screams pierced the night as these savage predators dragged men from their tents into the wild. Most reports claimed 135 people were eaten by the two lions that year. But the company, eager to downplay the incident and avoid inflating the numbers, officially declared only around 30 workers missing. The violence didn't end until January of that year, when Patterson finally hunted the lions down. It wasn't easy. He built thorn barriers, lit night fires, and imposed curfews. Still, the attacks continued, leading fearful workers to believe in curses and even rebel against Patterson. It took Patterson months to kill the terrifying pair of African lions, who had grown massive from gorging on human flesh during months of slaughter. Patterson was instantly hailed as a hero for ending the brutal crime spree and praised around the world. Once the threat was gone, bridge work resumed and the workers finally regained confidence. The project was completed in February 1899. As a historical memento of the massacre, Patterson kept the lions' skins and skulls. In 1907, he published a best-selling book, The Man-Eaters of Tsavo. A quarter-century later, the skins and bones were sold to Chicago's Field Museum, where they were mounted and displayed to the public as legendary monsters. But the story didn't end there. Bruce Patterson, zoologist and Field Museum curator, spent years studying the lions. Chemical tests on their hair keratin and bone collagen confirmed they had eaten human flesh in the months before being shot. The tests also revealed one lion had eaten 11 people and the other 24, making the actual death toll just 35, far less than Patterson's claim of 135. In 2009, Nathaniel J. Dominy, associate professor of anthropology at UC Santa Cruz, said, "It was a historical mystery for years, and now the contradiction has finally been addressed. We can imagine the railway company had reasons to downplay the deaths, and Patterson may have had motives to exaggerate them." A second study revealed the lion who ate more people had dental disease, a bad jaw, and skull damage. He likely turned to eating humans out of desperation. Meanwhile, there was a noticeable decline in other prey, mainly elephants. So when humans entered the area, they became easy alternative meals. Although we know more today about the truth of the Tsavo lions, they remain mythical symbols of their era. As Bruce Patterson told the Chicago Tribune in 2009, the Tsavo lions' remarkable achievement was that they halted the British Empire at the height of its power in Tsavo. The story of the Tsavo lions became legend, told as a tale of courage and survival. But more importantly, it's a reminder that nature can be cruel and unpredictable, and that no matter how advanced mankind becomes, he remains vulnerable to untamable forces.